Welcome back to Cult Pop. I'm your host, Jim Hall, and we're at Penguicon 2009, this year in beautiful Romulus, Michigan, and we're having a lot of fun, and we tracked down John Scalzi, friend of the show, good friend personally, just a guy we love having on the show. He's got some stuff. We really wanted to have John on today to congratulate you for your Hugo win last year and your Hugo nomination now this year for Zoe's Tale. Congratulations, my friend. You certainly deserve it. But we're really proud of you. We were having our fingers crossed for you last year. Winner in the fan writer category. This year nominated for Zoe's Tale, and I don't want to say anything to jinx it, but we're certainly thinking good thoughts there for you also.
Thank you very much.
So congratulations, and now for new people tuning in here in Michigan or people on the internet, let's start right off and give them kind of a synopsis of Zoe's Tale, and just a fantastic novel.
Oh, thank you. Well, Zoe's Tale is a story that I wrote. Tor had wanted me to write something in my Old Man's War universe of books, but at the same time to make it something that new readers could approach, and also particularly for younger readers, because the other three books in the series, Old Man's War, Ghost Brigades, The Last Colony, are meant, so they skew towards adult readers, but they wanted to give something that you could give to a teenager, or you could give to someone who's like 13, 14 years old, and they could follow it and not have any sort of content objections or language objections. So it worked out very well because we have a character named Zoe, who is a 16-year-old girl. She gets transported to this new colony world, and in her experience of life, one, being part of this new colony world, and the other thing about this colony world is that it is actually a sort of deception. That one of the reasons that they founded the colony in the first place was to lure a bunch of aliens who want to make war on the humans into a trap. And on one sense it works, on the other sense it puts everybody in the colony, including Zoe and her parents, at risk. So the question becomes, how can a 16-year-old girl help save the people that she loves, and what are her responsibilities towards that? And I just had a whole lot of fun writing it. It was difficult for me as a writer because this is a 16-year-old female character,
voice, right.
And I'm just about a 40-year-old man, and trying to get into that sort of headspace was it was a challenge.
I remember prior to the book coming out, you had posted some different sections of the book and different things saying, hey, what do you think about how, and just rave reviews, because you really did, from young ladies and your wife and other people saying, hey, you did hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I did hit the nail on the head, but to be fair, I took several swings.
Yeah, it took some work.
Ow! Yeah. No, what had happened was I actually did a first run, and I thought, wow, this is great, this is so clever, I'm so good. And I showed it to my friend Mary Robinette Cole, who's this year's Campbell Award winner, and she wrote back to me, she's like, yeah, no, not so much. And I'm like, how could that possibly be? And I showed it to my wife, and she's like, oh, she was being nice to you, honey. So it took work to get to that point with the character. So when I finally got it, I was like, yes. And I have to say, at this point, one of the things that really pleases me about the Hugo nomination, and this is going to sound goofy, but I'm okay with that, is I'm happy for the nomination, not for myself, but for the character, because I spent so much time with the character, and I, sort of feel like to the character like a parent would feel towards a child. So, when the book got the nomination, I was like, oh, Zoe's grown up.
Yes.
It's just very pop.
And for fans of the universe, it's kind of the third book retold.
Right.
From Zoe's, and so it's really, really neat, and I recommend going back and reading the third book after you've read Zoe's Tale, and it just bookends so well. It's really, really cool.
It's told in told in parallel time, and part of that was because in the last book, the last Colony, there were a couple things that fans and the readers were going, you didn't explain that well enough. What's wrong with you? And so this gave me an opportunity to go back and sort of clarify those things. But more than that, also, I thought it would be fun to do it from the same point of view, or from a different point of view, same time frame, but make sure that there are two, in fact, completely separate stories, even though there are some overlaps in events and time and everything else like that, that you get two separate reading experiences. It's not just the same story over again.
Well, I absolutely love the book, but like you said, and I recommend it home if you've got a young person in the home who you'd like to get into the science fiction. Great starting off point, great novel. And you've praised before people like Scott Westerfeld, people like that who are really helping get the young people into the science fiction and reading early, like we did it when we were young. Well, now you've put a book out there, and all your stuff can be read, but this is really something that a young man or young woman can really embrace, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And of course, we wish you the best of luck on your nomination on that. But you've got a lot of other cool things going on that we wanted to talk about. You did some editing you wanted to talk about.
Right. There's this project that we did. It's an audio project. Audio.com, which does audiobooks online, approached me and said, would you like to do an audio anthology for us? And I said, no, I wouldn't. And part of the reason is that anthologies, I don't want to make them sound like they're no effort, but they're pretty much the same all the time, which is you think of some sort of subject. Today's subject will be cheese. And then you do, cheese in science fiction, and you have a whole bunch of people write about cheese or whatever. And that just wasn't very exciting to me. The thing I wanted to do was to make a project that it was a little more involved. So what I suggested said, I don't want to do an anthology per se, but what I'd like to do is get 4 or 5 really good writers together. We create a world together. And once we've created this world, this shared world that we've developed, then we go off and write separate stories. We write the stories, we show each other the work while we're writing it so we know what everybody else is doing.
Right.
We incorporate it all together and make this anthology that at one point, one level is very communal because of all the work we've done together, but it's also about individual stories. And so we did, and the idea that we had the thing center on was cities of the future, and not just like Jetson cities, but the idea of logically extending out from where we are now. And what we ended up with was a project called Metatropolis, meta meaning beyond the cities, talking about cities in decline, what happens on the edges of those cities, how they develop realistically from where we are now. And what's been really interesting about that is the book came out in October, the audiobook came out in October, right around the same time the economy was just like collapsing, and people started worrying specifically about what's going to go on in cities with all the foreclosures and everything else like that. And as it happens, we've covered all this in the book. So if you want to know what's going to happen to
John knows.
Yeah, with the next 20 years, you want to be listening to the audiobook, and then there's also going to be the print edition that will be coming out in July. Now, one of the things that's actually very exciting about this is that Metatropolis was nominated for a Hugo as well in the Best Dramatic Presentation long-form category. And that's usually a category where you get movies. And so in fact, our competitors this year are Dark Knight, WALL-E, Hellboy 2, and Iron Man, and then our little audiobook project. It's the first audiobook project that's ever been nominated for a Hugo, and we're just,
So you really are, when you say we're happy to be nominated, you really are.
We are amazed, stunned, and happy to be nominated, because it's also, people forget that you can nominate other things other than in the movies. And then the way that I tell people is, it's like, this is the one we want to win, because you know what? Chris Nolan, the director of Dark Knight, he doesn't care if he wins a Hugo. I care if I win a Hugo. Give me that Hugo.
And he had $100 million to work with. You guys didn't have close to that.
we talked by email. We got together. The most high-tech thing I did was I went into a recording studio to record some narration. But regardless of what happens, just the fact that we were nominated was very, very cool.
Well, spectacular, and we'll have the information up both on the show and on the website so people can link up and either get the audiobook or the novel. And then you had some other news that's just really incredible. You broke to me, and you've been telling people you've gotten into the TV business, John.
I've gotten into the TV, and not just here.
And a lot of us think about time, right? A lot of us think that's about time, because we need you in the science fiction world. Tell us what's going on with that.
Oh, what happened was a couple of years ago, the folks who do the Stargate series, the various series, contacted me and asked me if I would be interested, and I said, I don't know. I don't know that I have enough time, and also I don't follow a whole lot of Stargate. Not that it isn't a good series. It's just I'm writing.
Right.
So and they said, well, we are thinking about doing a new series, and if we do that, would you be interested in helping us out? And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I didn't think about it again. And about a year later, they contacted me and said, okay, our series is starting. Would you be interested in being a creative consultant? And I was like, sure. What does a creative consultant do? Well, what a creative consultant does is they send me their scripts. In their first presentation, rough drafts and stuff like that. I read the scripts, and I tell them, looking from a science point of view, how their science is doing, looking from a character point of view, if they're being consistent with their characters, looking at the big picture, because each of the writers who's writing is writing their own separate script. What I'm helping them do is look over the arc of the story for an entire season and say, what is being represented, how are we doing it, and basically just checking the things that will trip them up or will have the fans who are watching going, hey, now wait a minute.
Right.
You want to get them past all that before, if they can get through the entire hour show without going, now wait a minute, then you've won. So that's part of my job, is just to look through there and make recommendations and comments and help them with their scripts. Now, I'm not writing any scripts right now. They'd asked me, they want me to at some point or another, I said, but I think you have so many people looking at each individual script, you need somebody looking at the whole thing.
Right.
And so I see myself as that sort of referee slash spell checker slash, editor, just checking things and going, have you thought about this? I don't know that water expands this way when it's frozen. Little things like that will trip you up.
So you're really overlooking the entire series, making sure everything.
Yeah, I want to be careful not to overstate, because I can't.
You're right.
I'm a consultant as opposed to a producer.
Right.
And you can't do that.
Right.
But I offer the suggestions. They take them or they don't, and it's. One of the fun things, though, is you have really fun conversations. One time, a producer called me up after getting my notes, and he said, so I'm on the phone with the producer of Stargate Universe, and he says to me, do we really have to have that planet there? Can we move that planet? And so just talking about, why not move that planet? An entire planet. Why not move it?
Sure.
Well, I guess you can.
As far as I'm concerned, it's okay, Jeff.
So Stargate Universe is the series, and it debuts, I believe, October 2nd on the Sci-Fi
channel. So we can see your name then on the
screen? Part of the contract is I get my own little title card.
Good.
Yes.
Good. Excellent.
I'm very excited about that.
Well, congratulations on that. And I know down the road we're hoping for other news from you and other things going on. And we just always love having you on the show. Anytime you have anything you want to talk about or promote, you're always welcome here.
Thanks.
I want to wish you continued success. I wanted to tell folks at home, go out, pick up Zoe's Tale.
Yes.
We want to wish you all the best of luck without jinxing you for the upcoming awards. And we look forward to seeing you sometime next year, and we'll get you on the show again and talk some more, John.
Great.
Congratulations again,
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the show.
Great.
Okay, that was John Scalzi. As always, we've posted his website. You go to our website, and you can get to John's website very easily. He's always got a lot of stuff going on there and a lot of fan interaction, so it should be a daily stop for you. And thanks, folks, for watching Cult Pop, but stay tuned, and we'll be back with more from the 2009 Penguicon. Welcome back to Cult Pop. With me now is Jim Hines, and you'll remember Jim was on the show about 1.5 years ago, and he was talking about the wonderful Goblin series, Goblin Quest, Goblin Hero, and Goblin War. We got a great response to that, and now Jim's got a new series of books out, and he's on today to talk about a couple of those books and all his other great works. But the Stepsister Scheme was out about 8 months ago and still out and available for purchase. A great novel. And now brand new out, The Mermaid's Madness is brand new at bookstores and something you're going to want to pick up. So we're happy to have Jim on today to talk about everything. Jim, thanks so much for being on again.
Thanks for having me back, Jim.
I absolutely loved your Goblin series. You did a fantastic job, and you've got a great fan base, a rabid fan base from that. And now you've started a new series, kind of reimagining fairy tales, and that in your first book, the back reads something very funny, that happily ever after is kind of just a joke. It doesn't really end happily ever after. So going with that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your new series?
Sure. Basically, the series came about because of my daughter. She was younger. She was going through the princess phase that a lot of young girls do. We had princess pajamas, princess bedsheets, princess Kleenex, you name it. It had princesses slapped all over it. And eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I don't mind that she likes princesses. I don't mind that she's into Barbie and Disney. But I wanted to give her something different. So I came up with basically taking these old fairy tales, going back before Disney got a hold of them, before they turned into a merchandising franchise, and took those old heroines, took Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, and basically gave them the chance to be their own heroines, to tell their own stories, to take care of themselves, to rescue the prince. And what I ended up with is pretty much old fairy tales blended with Charlie's Angels. You've got Snow White, who, after her fairy tale, is left with this very powerful magic mirror. Her mother was a witch. It only makes sense she would have some magical ability of her own. You've got Sleeping Beauty, who, before the fairies cursed her, they also gave her all sorts of gifts. They gave her grace. They gave her dancing ability. They gave her the sort of things that make you just about perfect when it comes to training for a ninja. So we've got Sleeping Beauty, Ninja Warrior. We've got Cinderella, or Danielle, who she's always had the ability to talk to animals. And very soon in the first book, we know her mother has given her glass slippers and the gown and all of that. In the stepsister scheme, she receives something a little more practical for that book. She gets an enchanted glass sword.
Right.
And basically, the three of them team up to save the prince, fight the bad guys, and do all of those things that traditionally the princes do, while the princess stays back and looks pretty. So that was the first book. And then for Mermaid's Madness, which is the one that just came out, I stayed with those three heroines, but also incorporated The Little Mermaid, which, if you go back and read the Hans Christian Andersen, this is a twisted tale. It is messed up, and the first time I read it, even back then, I was like, oh no, this is not how this is going to end. So I basically incorporated The Little Mermaid, made her into the bad guy for this one, and sent her up against my other three princesses. It's been a lot of fun.
Jim, I'm real pleased with the wonderful feedback you've gotten. And when we talked at one of the earlier summer conventions about the stepsister scheme, you were getting people coming up to you and saying how much they really enjoyed that book, because at the time that was the newest release, and just how thrilled. And you were getting a nice mix of the daughters, like you're talking about. So you wrote this originally for your daughters and something to be proud of, but you had moms and also dads. Everybody is really enjoying the heck out of this series.
Pretty much the reactions have been very positive. I mean, no book is perfect, and no book will appeal to everyone. So, anyone who goes in expecting nothing but positive reviews is in for a bit of a reality shock. But yeah, I've gotten some very good reactions, and like you said, surprisingly, not just from girls and women readers, but also from male readers. Sometimes it's, for example, in one case, a man that I talked to recently, he first picked it up to read it for his daughter, and make sure, is this appropriate? Is this the kind of thing that I want her reading? And went on to post a nice article online explaining not only did he love the book, but it had gotten him back into reading fantasy, which is wonderful. The only real problem I've run into is occasionally I will hear from a male reader who emails me and says basically, Jim, you've got a book with 3 girls on the cover. I can't read this. I can't be seen in public reading this. To which, I don't consider that a problem with the book.
Yeah, and I say man up. I think they're great books, and I think you can read anything you want, and the heroines are great heroines in these books. So it's something great for your daughters to be proud of, but it's great fun reading. And something else that's really great is The Mermaid Madness is out now, and that's what we're talking about. But you've also got a third book in this series coming out, and that's going to be coming out in early 2010, middle of 2010. So this is another trilogy.
Actually, this one's going to be 4 books.
Oh, 4 books.
The third one that you mentioned is called Red Hood's Revenge. That one comes out in July. It started out as a throwaway line in Stepsister Scheme. The characters are talking to one another about how the old fairy tales, there's some truth there, but there are some pieces that are missed as well, which, obviously I'm running with those fairy tales. Somebody mentions Red Riding Hood. And Talia, the Sleeping Beauty character, explains that Red Riding Hood, after that whole wolf incident, that sort of thing could change a woman, and she has gone on to become the most feared assassin this side of some made-up country that I can't recall at the moment. So after adding that line, went back and realized I've got to bring her back. I've got to bring Red Riding Hood in, and I've got to see what happens when you pit Red Riding Hood, this killer assassin, against Sleeping Beauty, Ninja, because that just sounds too cool. And then the other thing I'm working on right now, book 4, which currently does not have a title, is going to be a take on The Snow Queen, which is one of Hans Christian Andersen's lesser known than The Little Mermaid. It's still a well-known fairy tale, but not one that Disney has gotten its hands on yet.
Well, I know, Jim, that this series is, as I said, getting rave reviews. People are really enjoying it. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, for people who are seeing you for the first time on my show, if they're not familiar with your last appearance, your Goblin series is beloved. And I think it's very impressive that you did jump into a whole new series because the Goblin series was so popular. Will you ever return to that universe?
Never say never, right?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. At the moment, I don't have any plans to do another Goblin book, which is about the most solid answer I can give you. It's always possible that I will come up with a new idea that I absolutely want to write about Jig. It's possible that a movie company will pick up the Goblin books and suddenly the publisher will offer me $1 million to write another one. Yes, I can be bought, and if someone wants to offer me that $1 million, I would be more than happy to do more Jig books. At the moment, though, I was done with the series. I had told the stories that I wanted to tell about Jig and his fellow goblins. I had taken them from where they started out, which is they're inside the mountain. They're very much the underdogs of the fantasy society. And by the end of the trilogy, okay, they're still the underdogs of fantasy society, but they're in a better place. They're in a new place. Jig has grown. The goblins have grown. And it felt like the right place to stop. I get regular emails complaining that I'm not doing more books. I have one sitting in my email from just last night, all the way from Germany, saying, "Dude, what are you doing? Where's our 4th book? Come on." But honestly, I'm not going to write a story unless I've got something I really want to tell. I don't want to force it, and I don't want to start putting books out just for the sake of a paycheck.
Sure.
With the exception of that $1 million paycheck, of course.
Now, obviously, that would be, so we can hope that down the line we'll see what happens with your thought processes and when it comes. But that would at least be a few years away because of the stepsister scheme, that whole trilogy now going into a 4th book. So we're looking at least 2012. So, folks, you can still dare to dream, and maybe sooner or later Jim will do some more Goblin stuff, because I also love that Goblin stuff. I've got to admit, I'm one of your fans saying, come on, one more book, one more book. But something I wanted to bring up, Jim, is you've been dabbling in some short fiction. You've worked a lot with that, and you've had some real nice stuff lately. Story in particular last year in Realms of Fantasy, and that got a lot of positive feedback. If you want to talk a little bit about some of your short story writing, and if maybe we'll see a short story collection sometime soon.
Okay, let's see. I believe the story that you mentioned from last year was called Ours to Fight For, which was sort of an alternate World War II with elves, which when you boil it down to the concept sounds kind of silly, but I was actually quite proud of the way that one turned out. It was really my first foray into historical fiction. I came away with a whole new respect for the amount of research that goes into doing that well, but was quite pleased. Basically took the whole Hitler-Nazi setup, and the premise was, okay, how would this work if you've got elves who are, in so many fantasy portrayals these days, they're faster, they're stronger, they live longer. They're basically better. Which is kind of obnoxious and a little annoying, but
Sure.
You've got Legolas tramping along the snow, killing Oliphants. You can't argue with that. So in this version of World War II, the elves look around and they basically say, you know what? We are better. Let's run with that. And the elves begin to take over that Nazi role. The difference being, and the question that I tried to leave the reader with, are they right? I mean, in the way World War II played out, obviously, this was a very horrible thing. Nazis, they're just messed up.
Sure.
totally racist, totally out of their skulls. This is pretty much universally agreed upon. If you replace them with elves, something that a race that has a legitimate argument for being better, the whole situation becomes much messier.
Mm-hmm.
Which it was interesting to explore. Switching to much lighter fare, the most recent short story I had come out was in Esther Friesner's anthology Strip Mauled, which we've all heard of the urban fantasy genre. Esther was putting together a collection of suburban fantasy, and this one was about werewolves. My story for the anthology is essentially what would happen if you had a werewolf enter Sesame Street. Of course, it's not Sesame Street for copyright reasons, and I don't feel like getting sued, but I had an absolute blast. Muppet werewolves coming in, terrorizing the other Muppets. It was a great time. And that one, like I said, just came out in Strip Mauled in early September.
Excellent. Well, Jim, I'm a fan of your short story writing, so I hope sometime in the future we can see a short story collection also. But we're running short on time, as we always do. You're a great interview, a lot of interesting stuff. I want to remind folks, while we've got a minute or so left, tell folks about your website. There's a lot of great stuff going on there. People can get free portions of your book and short stories and all kinds of stuff. So tell folks at home about your website.
Sure. Before I mention the website, I should say there is actually a short story collection if you speak German. Germany was very happy with the Goblin books, and they have put out a short fiction collection, including some Goblin short stories and some of my other work. Unfortunately, the U.S. hasn't caught up yet, so as soon as that comes out, I'll let you know.
Okay, great. And we've got a few seconds here left, about 30 seconds. Tell the folks at home about your website real quick.
The website is www.jimchines.com. Like you said, it's got some links to free short stories. It's got samples of the novel. It has the blog. It has pretty much everything you'd want in a website and more, including my latest project, which is a roundup of all of the humorous science fiction and fantasy that's come out in 2009. It's www.jimchines.com.
Okay, great, Jim. We love having you on the show. You're a great author, a lot of fun to have on, and just a great guy. So we continue to wish you the best over here at Cult Pop. Folks, that's going to wrap up another show, and I remind you, if you just loved what you saw with Jim or earlier with John, and you want to be able to get to their websites and didn't jot it down, just go to our website, www.cult-pop.com, and everybody's got a quick and easy link right there, all of our guests, so you can watch the episode again and link right onto their websites. So we thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.